Welcome back everyone to episode 2 of our tutorial series on Advanced Tactics Gold. So at the end of last video, we finished our turn. We should, if we were going to be playing efficiently, go into production now, but we're just going to move through things piecemeal. So let's go ahead and end the turn. Excuse me, yes, we'll end the turn. And because we didn't choose the play by email settings, this is going to jump us right into the next player. You can think of this as like hot seat or something. Note that this will, if you're playing against another player, this will ruin the surprise because you'll get access to their information. Although this isn't so important, even if you knew this, it wouldn't be the most game-breaking thing, but we get fuel, somebody got experience from self-study, not important for us. This episode is going to be about attacking. So I think the first order of business is for us to move. I'm going to play on this zoomed out mode just for a little bit here. We're going to start using the hotkeys instead of using this click, but I will use it once. But now from now on we're going to move this guy here. I right click there just to select the hex so you knew which one. So we'll go boom, boom, boom. And this guy's going to move, he's going to move over to this bridge actually because we want him to support the south. So everything is the same with the Russians compared to the Germans, except for we have 2 extra divisions, basically. They had 2 in the rear, and we have 4 total in the rear. So that's going to be very helpful for us. In the south, I don't think there's anything we should really do. In fact, you can generally accrue larger entrenchment for up to a maximum, but the longer you stay in one place. Also, just note that our readiness is not at 100%. And that's going to be important. Essentially, readiness is a linear factor with your combat value. So if your normal combat value is 100%, readiness of 80 means you're fighting at about 4/5, and a readiness of 50% means you're fighting at about half your normal combat value, your nominal combat value. So that kind of shows here. If you remember, I don't remember the exact combat value, but I think it was something like 90, 91, something like that for the Germans. And now we're stuck with combat value 73, even though you see the subformations are all identical. If you ever want to know where this combat value is coming from, you can see the combat stats and the PowerPoints down here. So every infantry rifleman we have is adding 1 combat value. The mortars are adding 5. And so on, which brings us up to a total of 73 in the end. That combat value is actually modified also by our morale, our experience, and our readiness. So although the raw value is probably less than 73, even though our readiness is below 100, that's because experience and morale actually factor into that value as well. So with all those things, we are left with this value of 73. Now, when you're on the attack, you typically want a 4-to-1 or more ratio for your attacking. This game really heavily emphasizes the advantage of the defender. And although, I think it's a little bit too much, it bogs down the game sometimes, but it is the mechanics in place, and it still makes for a very fun game. So what I'm going to do is move my units forward. Also, I guess we'll talk about reconnaissance right now. We know, because we just played as the Germans, that these are all identical to our Russian units, 30, 24, 1, 3. But when we look over here, we see 22, 1, 1, 2, which we know is not correct. And even worse, on this one, we see that they only guesstimate 7 riflemen are in this unit. This is, the prediction that we have is based on the current reconnaissance on the enemy hex. So, if you want to know more about their unit, you have to increase the reconnaissance. You can do that usually just by moving units closer, or by having units with more reconnaissance. You can look at the reconnaissance thing if you go to, I think it's a general? Yeah. The recon points here, you can see that every infantry unit only has 1 recon point. I don't have any jeeps or armored cars currently in play. If we just jump into production just for a second so I can show this, we go to the jeep and we can click on the question mark here, which shows excellent reconnaissance, of course. This is going to be recon points of 25. So 1 jeep is effectively the same as 25 units of infantry for reconnaissance. It's going to add a lot of recon, basically. And the more recon you have, the better you'll be able to identify what your enemy forces are. So in this case, we see that The Reconnaissance is 34 and 34 on both of these. And this is actually pretty bad, a really bad estimate. I would say on the tail of a Gaussian distribution. I'm not sure what kind of distribution or what they use to generate these values, but this is a pretty bad estimate for 34 Reconnaissance, which usually doesn't have that poor of an estimate. This is something more like what I would expect, being off by like 33%, 50% even. But being off by four, a factor of 4 is, in my opinion, worse than you'd expect for Reconnaissance 34. Just to give you, you'll just learn how the Reconnaissance plays into it the more we get into it. We can increase the Reconnaissance by moving our unit forward. And because I want to demonstrate attack, we're going to do a really ill-advised attack on this turn. Okay, so I hit my move key, and this now doesn't just show me the gray area, it's giving me these red triangles. These are indications that if I move into whatever hex the arrow is coming from, I can do an attack from that hex into the hex it's pointing towards. That means I'm going to have enough action points left. So although normally you would see the movement, like this is your max range, when you get into enemy territory, it just shows you if you have enough action points to attack there or not. Now, if there's no unit in that hex, it's going to show you just a gray area like here, same as always. But if you're wondering if you can attack this hex or move into an enemy-controlled hex with an enemy unit inside of it, look for these red arrows. We are going to, I think we're going to do our attack on this unit of 49 because according to our knowledge, that's the weakest unit. Although we know that it's technically, they're all the same. So let's put 2 of our units here, 1 here. We'll move this unit up, even though it's just going to be supporting, but that does increase the Reconnaissance. And you can see that with the Reconnaissance of 132, we've now increased our knowledge of this. So it gets it a lot closer to what we actually know of those units. And this one as well has gotten slightly better. But they're still off by a little bit. How poor your first estimate was is going to impact all the subsequent estimates, because the better and better you learn, the more you learn about the unit, it just moves it closer to its true value. But if you started really far off, it means that you might not be getting that much closer. You're getting closer, but if you might still be really far away. Take a drink before I continue. Okay, so I covered how Readiness is a linear scaling of your combat value. If you want to see your combat value, you could just click on this information, and now we go to combat stats. This table here shows you more or less how this unit interacts against other types of units. So the Rifleman, this is your standard infantry unit. Note that infantry has a built-in advantage for defending, that it attacks at half of its rate of defense, although the chance it'll be killed in either way is the same. This is actually further boosted by the entrenchment score, which we can see down here. So forest has pretty good entrenchment, fields have decent entrenchment, plains have, there we go, plains over here have relatively poor entrenchment, and swamps, as you'd imagine, have almost no entrenchment at all. Also, different units can entrench different values. If you want to know the entrenchment values, we're just jumping all over the place, but if you go back to landscape where we learned about our action points, this also shows the entrenchment. The first number is how much entrenchment you'll get just from moving in, and the second number is going to be the entrenchment max that you can get. I think. I'm pretty sure that those are the 2 values. Okay, so what about our attack, you say? And let's get into it then. So the combat values first, yeah. The way this works, what I guess, although I'm not 100% sure, I feel like it's true though, is I think it's a random number which is rolled between 1 and whatever number this is, and that's compared against the HP of the unit that you're attacking. So if I go to compare here, let's just compare this against a light tank, for example. So a light tank, infantry trying to attack armor is going to attack at 60 or defend at 60, and it has 100 action points against them. A light tank attacking infantry is going to have 1,300 attack points, which means that, almost any number it rolls is going to be over 100. It has a more than over 90% chance of killing whatever unit it's attacking. Even on the defense, it has 640 value. And its hit points also are higher on the attack, but still really high even on the defense. And this shows you that tanks are just better when they're mobile. If they're just standing in place, that's when they're at a disadvantage. So this is how you can compare different units and see where their strengths and weaknesses are. Instead of comparing with a light tank, we could compare with, I don't know, a mortar team. And we can see that mortar teams are better on the attack, which we have mortar teams. They have the same hit points, which we would expect for infantry. They should all have 100 hit points. If we wanted to know what a machine gun is going to look like, well, these are better on the defensive, but they're actually really poor against armor, as you'd imagine. So that kind of gives you an idea of how your units are going to do, and it also probably gives us an idea about how we're going to do. I said that we should have at least 4 times the combat value of the unit we're attacking, and we know that we're kind of undervaluing this unit because it has 2 mortars and 30 riflemen. On top of that, this combat value is a weighted value over all the unit's general capabilities, but if you can take advantage of a unit's specialty, for example, if you had, let's say, just a unit of pure machine guns, and it gave you a combat value of 100, but you ended up defending against infantry with that unit of machine gun, its combat value is actually much higher than 100. So we're fighting against machine guns, so this is probably going to go very poorly for us, but let's do it anyway. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about before we jump into the attack is actually a mechanic of the attack. It's the attack stack. This is the mechanic which controls you can't send like an infinite number of forces through a small frontage. The more units you put onto a front, the less mobile or the less each one can maneuver. The extreme case of this would be if you thought of just a few units moving through a forest. They each have their own cover. An explosion in one area is going to have a very low chance to impact more than one person. Then you can think of the counter of that if you just, like you can think of Enemy at the Gates, the battle where they're, and the Russians are charging in, that kind of fictional sequence where the Russians are just pouring in a wave, and or like a World War I charge almost, where people are so closely packed together, you can just spray bullets and hit almost anything, and an explosion will kill multiple, tens of people even. So this is what the attack stack is controlling. If you put too many units into an attack to get more offense, your defense is going to suffer. And I don't know, I think your offense might suffer as well, so I'm not exactly sure what the attack stack does. I just have a general feel for the mechanics that, in general, when you are attacking, so first you can get the attack stack from combat. You see the stack points here. So 1 for infantry, and it's 5, I think, for an AT gun. Yep. Which means that 1 for all of these is 36, 41 if we add the 5 for the AT, and then the horses are also 1, which gives us the 44, and that's the stack points we see here. So we see that this is a stack of 88 because it includes 2 units of stack 44. The attack stack that we are allowed on this hex before we start suffering a penalty is 100. So as I hit the check mark on this unit and this unit, you can see our attack stack is going up. Let's grab all 3, and now we're actually over on our attack stack. But the interesting thing is, just by attacking from 2 hexes, we get a concentric bonus. So it doesn't really make sense because it appears like more front should be available when you're attacking from 2 hexes, but they consider it the same from attacking for 2 or 1. You're only allowed an attack stack of 100. If you get more hexes involved, each additional hex from here gives you an additional attack stack of 50. So 3 hexes would give you 150, 4 hexes would give you 200 attack stack without a penalty, etc. Now I wanted to make this final point about attack stack, saying that it's okay to exceed this by a little bit. In fact, there's a lot of cases where it's really advantageous to do so. And I would say exceeding it by 30 is generally a safe idea. I wouldn't go as far to exceed it by 100, unless this is like an emergency attack, it's do or die. But in general, if you want to play efficiently, you can exceed it, but I wouldn't exceed it by more than like 30, or let's say 50 points. 50 points is really like where I find, just by feel, I have no numbers to back this up, just by intuition, the return on investment goes south around 50 extra. So you can put up 132 out of 100. And we'll have a small, only a 4% bonus because we're just attacking from 2 hexes, but this concentric bonus, which just means, you know, if you're flanking the unit, attacking from more sides, you'll have a combat advantage. 4% is really negligible, so you would really have to attack from at least 3 sides. I think it's 10 or 15% from that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to the actual fight. We're going to see a display pop up, and it's going to update for every attack round, which usually goes up to 10, but things might go so poorly that, yeah, ours ended in combat round 5. So you can see the display was updating. The attacker is in the bottom and the defender's in the top. So we can see just by a graphical display that we killed about 10 of their units, and we lost, it looks to be like maybe over 30, maybe 35 units or so. A few of their units retreated. Now, if their units retreated, we know for sure that's because they took too many combat losses. We actually had some of our units, 2 of our divisions retreated just because they ran out of action points. Basically, the attack stalled because we spent part of our turn moving. So we didn't have the full action points. We only had enough action points to continue for 5 rounds. If this is a nice general overview, but if you want to see a more detailed view, it's better to go to switch view. And this is going to give you, okay, we lost 37, and they lost 8. So it was a really terrible attack. This also shows us some statistics like the starting readiness and now our current readiness. This also shows the entrenchment. So when you attack, you lose all your entrenchment, but because after the attack we settle back into the original hex, that gives us the default entering the hex entrenchment. But we actually wore down their entrenchment. So in the process of attacking them, we displaced them from their entrenched positions slightly. Although if you don't attack again, the entrenchment won't really matter. All we did was kind of stall their buildup. Okay, so we can see how poorly that went, and that's again because I think we need much more than just 3 to 1. Especially, it was really bad because our attack was done with units with less than 100 readiness. You should really just be attacking with perfectly combat effective units, and what I mean by that is just 100 readiness, unless you absolutely can't avoid it. So I think that's everything I wanted to cover. Let's move up this unit to kind of support now that we know that things didn't go very well in that attack. But the Russians start with a 2-division advantage, so I'm not going to really sweat this. And it's going to give us hopefully an opportunity to counterattack with the Germans, maybe with up to 3 forces, or 3 sides, or maybe we can attack over here from 3 sides, something. Let's try to give you guys a different viewpoint. Now, I'm still not going to change anything with production, which again is, if you were playing efficiently, a big no-no, because I'm going to keep things simple. But in the next turn, I expect that we'll start covering deploying new forces, and for that we might start interacting with production. Another topic, which is either next or the next, is supply, which is fun to go through too. I'm not joking, supply is done very well in this game. Okay, well thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.